Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. I'm Jean Prewitt. I'm the CEO of IFTA, which runs the American film market, and try to play a constructive hand in planning these sessions for all of you. Today, for the first time, we're going to actually do a session on an item which is one of the very building blocks of being able to do a production here in the United States, but one that we have rarely really poked at or explored because it's hard and scary. And we're going to try to make it less scary. As you know, the topic today is everything you need to know to work successfully with SAG-AFTRA and to bring your production into being. We're privileged today to have two incredibly experienced speakers. Susan Sprung, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Producers Guild of America, who came to the Producers Guild in 2012 as a senior executive, but still one that was learning her way around film financing, having done years and years of other kinds of financing, investment banks, real estate, et cetera, and kind of brought to the equation an ability to parse the sentence and to try to understand how film finance actually works and how to work well with independent producers. We also have Olga Rodriguez-Aguirre, who is the, let me find your current title, Executive Director of Entertainment Contracts and co-head of the film section of that area of SAG. For the most of us who've worked in this field for a long time, Olga is just Olga. There is no one who has dealt with SAG and tried to work their way through the process of getting contracts for talent approved, getting security arranged with the Guild so that the Guild is not worried about collecting residuals, et cetera, who does not know who Olga is. She is both your best friend and I understand for other people, sometimes your worst enemy, because she has been around this block for more than 20 years. Today, what she is going to try to break down for everyone is what's the best way to get through the process? How do you get through it, both having SAG respect you and your project and you respecting what they need to do to make sure their members are fully protected as they work for you? And in general, if you don't understand this, you really can't work in this town. And it's better to work in this town knowing how to do this well. It's not necessarily a secret handshake, but it is something where once you really know and are comfortable, knowing when to go to SAG in your process, what to ask, what to have in your hand in terms of documentation as you get there, your life will be a lot simpler. And we wanted to bring these two people here today in order to really not only explain the current process, explain some of the contractual provisions that you need to understand, but also to let you ask questions, in some cases from experience, in some cases where the process that is being outlined, frankly, is just so obscure and oblique, you don't actually know how you're going to get it done. And Susan and Olga are here to help unravel that for you. So thank you for being here. Susan and Olga, if you would like to come join, that would be great.
Thanks, Jean. Welcome, everyone. Before we start, I just want to thank all of you for joining us for this important panel. This is really an important panel for producers. And I just want to thank Olga, who is so unbelievable, for taking the time to join us today. And more importantly, I want to thank both Olga and Duncan, who always take the time to listen to producers' concerns and help producers navigate the process. And then a huge thanks to Jean Prewitt, who I know you all know, who has been the PGA's partner in this for Feels like almost a decade. And we really appreciate your wisdom, your leadership, so thank you. I hope everyone here has seen SAG-AFTRA's new producers portal. It is an incredible tool that they designed to try to help producers navigate the process. And Jean and I have been working with them on this for years, and it really is effective. So please, the next time you have a project, please make sure you use it. And the purpose of this panel is to help producers navigate this process. By the way, so everyone knows, we are recording this panel. We will circulate it. And if for some reason Olga leaves something out because this is so complicated, we'll make sure it gets added as an addendum to whatever we circulate. And with that, I'm going to move to my first question. Olga, can you start by explaining why you make producers go through such a daunting process to hire your members? What are you trying to achieve? And the one thing I want to say is we are all, meaning IFTA, PGA, SAG, we all work together because the most important thing to us is to keep our members employed. So with that, tell us about the process.
Sure, thank you so much. And everybody, thank you so much for being here, wanting to learn this area. Like Jean mentioned earlier, I've been doing this for a very, very, very long time. And I know it can be very confusing and daunting. And I have my notes because, and now I wish I had brought my glasses. But I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. But the big thing is, before I go into what are the best things to prepare yourself to dealing with SAG-AFTRA, I just wanted to recognize the importance of producers that hire SAG-AFTRA members on projects. I've been doing this work for 30 years, really, in total, because I used to work at Gaffner & Bush, and we represented some of the other unions, both DGA and the WGA. The relationship, I know, can be very challenging at times, but please know and make no mistake that producers and making sure that producers' needs do get met as part of this process so folks can start their productions, it's very, very important to us. Hiring our members is important. Our members want to work for employers. We are working very hard to look for ways to better educate folks on the process. So the website's being redesigned. The producer portal, as Susan mentioned, is very important. Really what I think the biggest theme, I think, for today will be really transparency on both sides. We want to be transparent with our process and why we ask for what we ask for. And we are hoping that when you come to us to sign up your project, that you are also going to be transparent. It's also really important on both sides. So there is a duty that the union owes to its members. And you can refer to it as a fiduciary duty, but really it is what's called a duty of fair representation. So we have to make sure that all of our members, we service them and make sure that they're protected, that both, safety, but also like the monetary obligations that are contained in the collective bargaining agreement are actually something that we see as sacrosanct. We want to make sure that our members are protected when they work on your projects. Part of the reason for that really is sort of the uncertainty in production, right? Like you have situations where right now there's lots of production companies. As long as I've been around, production companies start up, folks find money, they want to produce, they want to be creative. But we've also seen the underside of that, bankruptcies, sales of libraries, and that kind of thing. And because our members are on these pictures when there's sales of projects, we just want to make sure that the members continue to be able to look forward to being paid for exploitation of their images and their likeness and their voice. So that we're balancing both the creative duty that producers have and the duty that we owe our own members to make sure that they are protected.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit about what exactly you need to get you there so that your members are protected?
So the biggest obligations under the collective bargaining agreement are obviously initial compensation, residuals, pension and health. So those are the monetary obligations. There's also safety obligations. But the big thing is that we basically analyze every aspect of the production when you come through the door. So when you sign a signatory application, which is really, it's the beginning stage. That's when you've decided you have a production, you know what your budget is, you know, you sort of have your casting in place, but you want to start the process with us. So you fill out an application by going onto the website, and you tell us what the plan is. What's your budget, who you think is going to be in it, what the title is, that kind of thing. We, as part of that process, we require information from you in order to ascertain the risk. So we look at, you know, the budget, where's your budget coming from? So we're going to ask you for financing agreements. We're going to ask you for sales agreements. Like if we know that the budget of your picture, let's say it's $2 million, and we know that you want to be able to sell the picture in various territories, we're going to want a copy of the sales agency agreement, your distribution agreements, just everything that you have in place. So we get that from you directly, but we also do our own research to see really what's involved in the production.
Okay, so can I ask you a question? When a producer walks in the door, right, what else should they have in hand with them, right? What are the specific things that they should have that you need to review? I know you'll get some stuff outside, but what is it that they should be taking with them?
The financing agreements that you have in place, full chain of title, so the Form PA, any agreements or documents that you have that pertain to the IP that you're about to make your project on. Corporate documentation, we require that as well because the union needs to know who the employer is. So we'll look at limited liability company, articles of organization, that kind of thing. And we need information also on your sales. If you've had sales on the picture already, if you have a sales agent, I think those are the biggies, really. But and if that's not something that's reflected in the application, we do our own research to figure out what else we need.
Okay, now what happens if a producer comes to you and they don't have any of those things?
Well, I mean, I can definitely stress the most important part of who you have working with the union. It's very helpful if they already have that information. So sometimes if you have maybe a UPM or someone else on the production, if you have that be your contact with SAG, make sure that they are informed of all those questions that we're going to ask. I know sometimes folks use lawyers or more experienced maybe business executives, and that's fine too. But having the knowledge to be able to answer the questions, that will save you a lot more time if those people are actually informed.
Okay, so now I think one of the most challenging pieces for producers, and I'd like you to walk through each of these separately. Let's just start with, can you give us specifics about SAG security interest, what documentation you need? Can we walk people through why you do it, exactly what it is?
Well, I mentioned earlier that when you sign a production with SAG-AFTRA, the union's interest and the members' interest in the production doesn't just end after the production is over. We actually keep an eye on the picture as far as making sure that we get assumption from distributors, and if there is an assumption, some other form of payment with respect to residuals. But the security interest is really the most important one because in the event of anything happening to your production company, we want to make sure that we're a secured party. So at the point that someone declares bankruptcy, the security interest is the most important part to make sure that the union's interest is protected. So as part of that, I mentioned earlier, chain of title. We need to be able to take the lien, be able to file it with the Copyright Office, and the only way we can do that is making sure that we have good chain that begins from development of the project, from the first writer, all the way through all the different assignments. We also look at distribution agreements and sales agency agreements because, as you know, distribution agreements pertain to the grant of distribution rights, which are a copyright grant. So those are the documents we would need to make sure we have a good lien.
Okay, and how is the security deposit calculated?
Yes, a security deposit is extremely important. That is basically, as part of the paperwork that you sign with SAG-AFTRA, there's a form called the pre-production cast list, and that is what where you tell us who you've hired thus far, what roles there might be, what you've budgeted for those roles, and for people that you've actually already engaged, what their current salaries are. But the calculation of the security deposit is essentially constitutes 40% of the initial compensation and the pension and health. And we also include all the performers. So it's not just day performers or weeklies or Schedule F. It's also stunt performers and background. They're all included in that calculation. Oh, and the other thing I should mention as well, if you have a Schedule F performer, someone that is guaranteed a certain salary, another way to maybe lower the security deposit is by escrowing those salaries. And if there's an intention to do that, I highly recommend doing that as early as possible in the process, because in order for us to be able to back out that salary, we need to make sure it actually got paid over to the agent prior to the start of principal or prior to the start of clearance.
Okay, can you talk a little bit about distributors' assumption agreements?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that obligation is contained in the collective bargaining agreement. And so, the biggest issue we have, like the biggest hurdle, I think, and challenge for producers is when they've already sold the distribution rights to another party before they sign with us, that would require them to deliver to SAG-AFTRA a distributor's assumption agreement. And we recognize that that can be kind of difficult. But, so for instance, if you pre-sale the domestic before you come, I cannot stress to you how important it is to get those distributors to assume. If we find out that, or you've indicated in the application that you have a domestic distributor and you're not able to get assumption, which we recognize happens, I think, more on the foreign side, but can also happen on the domestic, then we're going to have to start talking about other ways to take care of that obligation, because that is an obligation that's contained in the collective bargaining agreement and needs to be dealt with prior to the project being cleared. So that's where you hear about the residuals reserves and the collection agreements.
Okay, so those are obviously, for producers in the room, the two most complicated and challenging pieces, and frequently the things that have me calling you on nights and weekends and saying, help. So why don't you start by walking people through the CAM, and then I want to talk about the residual reserve after. But if you could talk people through what the CAM is, what we're looking for. Jean and I have been working with you on this for years, so we could all use your knowledge on this.
Okay. Collection agreements they're excellent tools to take care of this issue. When you are not able to get assumption agreements, particularly on the foreign side, hiring a collection agent and obviously getting other parties, other stakeholders that are interested also to participate in that is very important. The collection agreement is the agreement that, and I'm sure this room already knows that, but where all of the gross receipts from $1 are deposited into an account, and a collection agent, I think the big ones in town are like the ones we've dealt with. There's like Vintage and Freeway, for instance, where the sales agents instruct the distributors to deposit their monies into one collection account, and the collection agent disperses those payments to all of the parties according to a collection agreement. Usually what the union requires there is that we come in order right after the collection agent fees and expenses. So quarterly, as gross receipts are deposited, they get paid out to all of the parties. And that's really the cleanest way and the best way, we believe, it's been very successful to take care of the residuals obligation.
Okay, so talk about if someone has a CAM in place, then you don't look to them, confirm this, that you don't then look to them for a residuals. Right. And if they are not fortunate enough to have a CAM in place, can you talk about the residual bond and what you're looking for there and how you do the calculation and how someone can manage that?
Yes. quickly, just with the collection agreement, they usually work pretty cleanly, like I said, from dollar one. Where a residuals reserve could come into play is if for some reason a collection agreement is impossible. Let's say the parties aren't agreeable, you can't find a collection agent, you can't do it in time, there's lots of reasons. If it turns out that a residuals reserve is necessary, and it can actually be necessary even if there's a collection agreement in place. And when that happens, it's because, for instance, let's say you have a picture that's $5 million and $2 million of it is coming from a bank. And that bank does not want to be a party to the CAM. In fact, they want to get paid first. Even if the collection agreement is drafted and completed with SAG-AFTRA as a party, we would require a reserve on that $2 million because we already know that $2 million of that money is not going into the CAM. We know that the bank is going to get that money first. So I just wanted to put that out there first.
So can I just jump in and just to clarify for folks? So if the CAM is in place and if anyone who's owed money is in the CAM, right, so that and SAG is in first position ahead of everyone else except for the CAM's fees, then you don't have to deal with a residual reserve, with a residual bond. But if there is an obligation or the bank wants to be senior, that's the situation in which you're in residual bond land.
Yes,
yeah.
when
Okay,
you're
good.
residual bond land and CAM land at the same time.
Okay.
As far as the way the residuals reserve work, that is usually a situation where, again, a distributor may have made some sales already to foreign distributors and they can't get assumption. And in many cases, it's because of the existence of a sales agent that we would require a reserve. And mainly the reason for that is because under the collective bargaining agreement, there's the obligation that you get assumption from each and every distributor. If you're not able to get that and you have a sales agent in your place, you sort of have subcontracted that to another party. Then we look at that point to a residuals reserve because we don't have privity or any kind of relationship with the sales agent. So if there have been pre-sales or even projections, we look, we ask for those as part of the process, and we look at those numbers to come up with an actual estimate. When you get an estimate from us, I would also highly recommend getting a copy of it, taking a look at how we've broken it down by territory, by media, just so that you're informed of how the calculation actually came into being.
Okay, so one of the challenges I think that producers face in that instance is they will say to me, I'm working on a very small indie movie, and SAG's calculation, because of the people I'm working with, is way too high.
Right.
How do you recommend producers navigate those situations?
I mean, I think that it's important to have a conversation with your business rep and say to them that, hey, I need more information on how you guys came up with this number. What's your allocation to theatrical and to all the other markets? Get a copy of it, take a look at it. If it doesn't make sense to what you've calculated for yourself, because that's the other thing, you might want to actually, if you know we may ask for a reserve, just come up with your own number that you're comfortable actually posting with SAG. And then I think that's helpful to the fact that you've thought about it, you've come up with your own solution, whatever that is. At worst, we can say no, but at least we're having a discussion about it. Getting the information, though, I think is the most important part, because then you can at least make your arguments. When SAG comes up with its numbers, it uses almost like comps, comparables on other pictures that have similar genres and things like that. We also get copied on a lot of collection agreements, so we know kind of what the rates are looking like for certain territories, but we recognize that that may not always be the right thing. So I would not take no for, just accept the number. You can, and don't quote me on that part, but I would definitely question it.
They are going to quote you.
No, it's fine. Say, Olga said, that's fine. But I think having the dialogue is probably the most important part in questioning it. And if you have better information that we can rely on, you should provide it.
And so, by the way, one of the things that keeps happening, or I keep hearing about, is that will happen for producers at the last minute. So what can they do to make sure that conversation happens early? Because obviously the scariest thing for a producer is for them to be about to go into production and then suddenly have to deal with posting the bond. So what can we do to make that happen earlier?
I think the most important part really is preparation. That's why I'm saying knowing what it is we require and just coming up with a plan and coming to us with it, I think is the most important part. But we also recognize that the nature of indie filmmaking is that things happen last minute. If your business rep isn't being responsive to you and you've been emailing them and calling them, and that's a different conversation and one that needs to be escalated to a manager, whether it's the managers, the business reps themselves, or if it escalates to me, it doesn't matter. I'll get involved if I need to get involved. But really, it's the preparation part's the most important part. But the hard part is, just as an example, the security deposit, and when you get the number, a lot of it can be based on the fact that maybe casting is not completed yet and the union doesn't get the information until the last minute. It just depends. But really, knowing what you need to provide and trying to get it, not providing the documents and kind of going back and forth is also not helpful, both for you and for the union, because what ends up happening is a lot of these business reps who work 9 to 5, right? I don't work 9 to 5, but they do. They're looking at, will I have the ability to review this documentation before the project gets cleared? Because they really do want to clear the project at least 1 or 2 days before you start. They'd prefer earlier if they can get the documents, but sometimes they don't. And they have several projects at the same time. What you want to be able to do is kind of cut off the argument, saying, hey, I provided everything, but really provide everything, right? And if you provided the full pre-production cast list, making sure that you stay on top of those numbers, because I already told you what that calculation looks like. Because sometimes what can also slow things up is if the back and forth of information isn't even, like if the union's been asking for documents, and I recognize that our emails are a lot. I read some of those clearance emails and I read what's required, and I know it's a lot, but do yourself a favor, read them and ask questions, because if you don't, you'll find yourself at the last minute not being cleared or being threatened for a shutdown, that kind of stuff. That's, I think, the part you don't want to end up in that situation, and a lot of that has to do with providing the information as timely as you can. And I recognize again that it takes time.
Okay, one of the questions that I constantly hear are producers are concerned that they're going to be asked to give a personal guarantee to get cleared. Can you tell me if you guys ever require personal guarantees from either individuals or their loan-out corporations? That's one of the biggest fears of producers.
We do not require guarantees from individuals. And if that happens to you, I want to know about it. But and we also don't require them of loan-outs. If the business reps see a company named, sometimes if they haven't done the research themselves, it may not, they don't realize it's a real company, so the request might be there. But really, you need to explain that, okay, this company is my personal loan out. This is not a company that has assets. Because that's really, when we look for guarantors, we're always looking for the company that either controls the copyright or controls the distribution of the picture, the company that owns the signatory. We look for companies that are going to be around. So when the signatory eventually goes defunct, inactive, we need to see who is behind that company so that we can at least have someone who's going to be around to be responsible for any amounts that might be due at a later date. we're looking for, I mean, you could call it the deep pocket, but in many cases it's not. It's really whoever is going to be responsible for the picture on a going forward basis.
Okay, and so from those folks, do you get security agreements?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes. And that depends on whether or not that party owns rights.
Okay. And then, so can you talk about the instances in which those companies will need to give you a security agreement?
The most important part with the chain of title is if, in fact, we have a situation where the signatory actually doesn't own the IP, but another party, maybe the parent, then at that point, we would require a guarantee from the parent on top of the lien against the parent and the signatory. So that's usually the instances where we would require it.
Okay. Do you have a recommendation for what producers can do to protect themselves from third parties who aren't paying them? Right, because what frequently happens is there'll be a company who is doing the distribution, they're the ones collecting all of the money, and then suddenly a producer's in a position where they're not getting paid.
In the case of when the producers provide a distributor's assumption agreement, obviously that distributor is responsible for paying those residuals. When the producer is always secondarily liable, but in situations where the producer no longer has any tie to the project, they don't own anything, they are basically, they've assigned the rights to another party completely or sold it, the most important document to obtain from them is what's called a buyer's assumption agreement, because that passes on the obligation to another party, and that's a way of protecting the producer for future, because if you're not responsible for the distribution of the project at that point, then that's something that you could kind of waive to the union. It actually needs to be provided to the union, but you provide that as a defense of some sort.
Okay, so let me ask a question. But if you don't have the assumption agreement and you do have a CAM, should the producer be protected in that situation? Because all the money's flowing into the CAM?
Well, once you get the collection agreement, there's language in there that talks about whether if there's obligations that are not met by the CAM, then at that point, usually the producer's already a party, so it's kind of dealt with within the collection agreement itself.
Okay, so do you have to have an assumption agreement before you get the CAM, or as part of the CAM process, or is that kind of belt and suspenders to protect a producer?
I mean, I think it's a smart idea to get the assumption agreement as well. I think it's good because you want to have that party be directly sort of responsive or have privity with SAG.
Okay, great. How do producers get their security deposit back?
Yes, I know. That's the big one. I was mentioning the email earlier, reading emails. When your project gets cleared, there's a lot of verbiage in those emails. But if there's language in the email that tells you that this will be looked at, that something is still outstanding, some document, keep a note of that. That's why we were mentioning earlier about having the party that's actually in contact with the union is the contact for the union. Make sure that you keep an eye on that and provide it even after you're cleared. Because what happens is productions start work, they complete the process, and then they go on their merry way, and then we don't hear from them again until they want their money back. And at that point, the rep will usually look back, and hopefully the producer portal will be helpful in this regard, because it lists out what documents were requested, and it can show you what you haven't delivered yet. And it's helpful to look at that. The other thing that's really important that everybody always forgets is the final cast list. As soon as you can get that done after post, turn it in as soon as possible, because that's a document that goes to the plans. The plans take around 6 weeks to 2 months to review it. So, and we don't have control over what the plans do. So, I think, having a little checklist for yourself that's what you need to do, or, get that in place I can't stress that to you enough. The other thing that we need is, if it's a low budget project, we would need the final cast report. Sometimes there may be outstanding performer contracts that we might want. And if there's any financial assurances documents that are missing from the clearance process, once you start requesting your security deposit back, we have a group of business reps that are called bond return reps, and what they do is they focus on returning the security deposits. Like they focus on, what they do is they run searches on the pictures and see, okay, what's outstanding? What did we tell the producer we needed? You know, do we have a good security interest? Is our lien in place? Are there any other parties that weren't involved in the picture that are involved now? Do we need documents from them? That kind of thing. That's where there's a lot of confusion, because then the producer's like, well, I gave you everything and the picture's done and we already paid the members. And the other issue that can sometimes come up are claims. Do not ignore claim letters, wherever they get sent to, because our members, when they work on the production, they'll file a claim with the union. The union will be in contact with the party that you guys gave to us as the contact person. So just make sure that that doesn't go by the wayside, because that can hang out there and the deposit, it will not be returned if those claims are not resolved. And the last thing I would say is make sure that after the production's over, whoever it is that was working for you was the contact for SAG, update us on who the new contact is. Because we find ourselves sometimes emailing UPMs, sometimes other production supervisors, and they've moved on to other productions and they can't help us, and then we have no one else really to go to. We normally will go into our system and find whoever maybe the president is or whoever was listed as the production contact. And that, you don't want to waste time doing that. You want to kind of try to stay on top of it if you can.
And so one of the ideas behind the producers portal and what SAG has been working on with us is that they will keep you updated on the portal. Jump in if I'm misstating anything. They'll keep you updated on the portal, so it will be clear to you at all times what information is missing and what you would need in order to get your bond back. Is that accurate?
That's right. The producer portal, I will say too, is in its current incarnation, but is being updated constantly, because it's an ever-changing document. We keep trying to update it and make it work better. I don't think it's that pretty, but I think it does the job.
And by the way, anytime Jean or I get any feedback, we always give it to SAG, and they have been really receptive about making changes to try to address people's concerns and needs. So if, as you're using it, you have suggestions, please reach out and let any one of us know, because it really is important. It's meant to be a tool to make your lives easier. Can we just briefly talk about, because one of the other things that I frequently hear about is, what are the instances and why would you then take a bond and say you're going to flip it into a security deposit into a residuals reserve or bond?
Right. That's actually why I stress, coming back to us earlier, you don't, if there's a claim that isn't resolved or there's some financial assurances document, like after the production is over, let's say you sell the picture to a distributor and you've not obtained an assumption agreement from them, that's where, a security deposit could continue to be held, and at some point a residuals claim arises, and then the union will try to settle it by using the security deposit to pay either the claim or turn it into a reserve to take care of the residuals, because there's no other way that the union's going to get its payment. So that's why I always tell producers, coming to us earlier rather than later, after the final cast list's been delivered to the plans, that's really where you want to be.
Okay, but now is that an instance where you would then convert it? Is that an instance where there isn't a CAM in place? Like, what can a producer do to avoid being put in that situation?
Yeah, that's a good question, because that's why you want to take care of the financial assurances, the residual stuff at the early stages. If in fact you sell the picture at a later date and you already know and we still have the deposit, try to get those distributors to assume. If they don't, come to us and see if there's a collection agreement that can be actually negotiated at some point, if you still have the sales agent. The union is interested in making sure that residuals are paid, however it is that the producer comes up with whether it's a collection agreement, or even a portion of the residuals reserve, if you can at least come up with that. But I think being more proactive is a better way to avoid having us hold on to the money. That's really what you want.
Okay, can you give us your takeaways before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, try to provide all the requested documents, even in draft form. So if it's not signed, just send us what you have. Don't delay, don't sit on it. Be prepared if in fact you can't get these distributors. I mentioned earlier, try to get them to assume. If you can't, be proactive about figuring out a way to either come up with an estimate of your own or start talking to collection agents and seeing if the other parties are interested in doing that. And just being transparent. I would say those are the three most important things.
Great. I know we're going to get to questions, but first, I just want to say, Olga, thank you. This is incredibly helpful and really important. So I just first want to thank everyone for being here, and in a minute, we will take questions. So thank you. Hang on, I'm going to grab the questions. Thank you. Okay. Oh, this is interesting. Does a producer need to contemplate security for residuals from other unions besides SAG when negotiating the CAM? Basically, they have to worry about DGA, WGA.
Security. Well, if you're talking about the DGA or WGA, they are also parties. If the picture is covered by DGA and WGA, yes, they would be parties to the collection agreements as well. And I think that those other unions, depending on the budget, also require security as well for residuals.
Now, were they ever a party to your CAM?
Yes, they're parties frequently. If we know that the project already has WGA and DGA coverage, they're almost always automatically included because the three unions do tend to talk to each other.
So then would a producer in that instance negotiate the CAM with just you, or do they wind up negotiating with each union separately?
It looks like what's happening now, because I don't negotiate them anymore, but what looks to be happening is you end up negotiating with SAG-AFTRA mostly because I don't know if the DGA has a staff that's dedicated to the negotiation of the collection agreements, but we have staff that is.
And so that in that instance, as long as they're all covered, then the producer should only, we think, have to deal with you because everyone else would be covered in the CAM.
That's correct.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. How early should you begin the clearance process with SAG? Should you start even when you don't have the full financial structure confirmed?
Yes, you should still contact SAG-AFTRA, even if your financial structure, because I think that happens a lot where the financing is not locked in. For us, it feels scary sometimes for producers to start a project. Like if they sign with us, I think what we have put in our paperwork is 6 weeks prior to clearance is a good indicator. That's what we put in our documentation, but many times the financing, I think, for producers isn't locked in yet. But I think that's a safe time to do it. I think where there can be difficulties, I think that producers may have, is if there are other productions that the business reps are dealing with that are starting prior to your production, it can sometimes delay the business rep's ability to contact you and start the process with you, because sometimes other people contact us kind of late. And we tend to prioritize projects by start date, unfortunately. If you're feeling like you're being completely neglected, that's not good. And you should definitely talk to a manager and just get reassigned to somebody else. We will assign you to somebody that may have a bit of a lighter load or may not have as many productions down the pipeline. So that's what I would recommend.
Okay. So that's interesting. So obviously, I get it why if someone's about to start production, that's where the focus needs to be. On the other hand, if you're being a good partner and trying to get something in really early.
Yeah, I would not want to punish producers for contacting us early. You know, I think that's why I'm saying, if you're feeling like you submitted your paperwork 6 weeks in advance of the production and you haven't heard anything, and you know, either call the office, because we do still answer the phones, and then, you know, talk to your business rep. If your business rep's not available, then, you know, talk to one of the managers and, you know, tell them, hey, I'm worried. I feel like I don't want to be caught last minute, not getting cleared. You know, can I get reassigned to someone else? And we will do that.
Okay. So obviously, one of the big takeaways here is communicate, be open, and that's fantastic. Let's just see if there are any other questions. Have any? And Suzanne, I see one here and I think one in the back.
Yeah.
Hey there, my name is Eddie. I'm a former Paramount Studios exec turned indie producer now. This has been extraordinarily clarifying, so thank you for this wonderful presentation. Olga, have you ever thought about becoming a producer? And if so, do you want to be my partner?
I've never thought about that. It scares me. I really admire all the bravery that you guys have, but, you know, no. Thank you, though. But hey, if you ever have questions, I mean, I think I gave to Jean or to you my contact info. Please email me. I do get a lot of emails, but to me, it's very important to open the lines of communication with producers and making sure that we do not hate producers. Please do not walk out of this room thinking that that's what she's saying. We don't feel that way at all. It's important to us to maintain those lines of communication open. So if you have a question, even no matter how dumb it sounds or you think it is, it's all right.
And I can tell you, we have asked Olga many, many questions that seem really dumb, and she is always infinitely patient and always helps us navigate them. Okay, Susanna.
Hello, Jeff Gadick from Destination Film Guide. Really a two-part question. First is, at any given time, what's the volume of projects that your team is working on? And then second would be start to finish, what's an average project take?
So, gosh, I would say probably on a monthly basis, at varying budget levels, probably 300 projects. The higher budget ones, anything from $2 to $8 million, sometimes below that. There's less of those. Those tend to be probably maybe in the 50 in a month. And then as far as, what was your second question? It was on, it was start to finish?
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? If we can clear a project in a week, sometimes less. It just depends on the information flow, whether we're getting what we need quickly. That doesn't happen that often just because of the nature of this work is, I think, a little slower. But I would say probably 2 or 3 weeks, generally.
Yes, hi, Olga. My name is DJ. I'm a director on a project. I'm right here in the back, way in the back.
Way in the back. Okay, so it's too late. Okay.
I'm the director. I wasn't the producer. But we completed an indie film recently We were initially under the micro low budget agreement, and halfway through the project, we actually raised some more money. We got lucky some of the financing because it fell through initially, then we went into production, and then the financing came. And so under the circumstances, we started as a micro low budget, but I think they want to bump up to, the producers saying that we have to bump up to the ultra low budget. I'm just trying to figure out I think there's a little confusion on what the process is, that the film is wrapped. Like, how does that work? Exactly.
Oh, the picture, yeah, well, you know what, that happens a lot. I'm trying to think, so email Joshua Vasquez, joshua.vasquez@sagaftra.org, and he can definitely guide you. He's one of our managers. We deal with that a lot, actually.
Hi, I'm Leah. Oops, this is loud. Sorry. I have a question regarding the jurisdiction of SAG, because I work a lot with European companies. I also spoke to SAG, and they said they act globally. However, a lot of the productions, actually like 90% of the productions in Europe are non-union, because obviously we don't really have a union, even though they would have 2 or 3 cast members that are SAG.
Yes, there's a lot of production, obviously, that is happening outside the country. There are several countries that have their own performer unions. Really, the rule is if it's a SAG-AFTRA member that you're hiring anywhere in the world, they should be covered by us. But we do have agreements. We have reciprocity agreements with a couple of unions. So, for instance, if you're working in the UK, we have an agreement that we work with Equity, where if it's a SAG-AFTRA member that's being flown from the US, for instance, to work in England, depending on the budget of the picture, and I'm talking mostly film, not TV. TV's a little different. That person would need to be covered by SAG-AFTRA and what's called a P&H only project. So that's how that would work. So you kind of start with the premise that if it's a SAG-AFTRA member, they need to be covered by SAG. But our members tend to be global, so they work all over the world because they live all over the world as well. So, and we're going to actually be updating, thank you for bringing that up, because we're updating our website contains some information that's not the most accurate anymore and not up to date. And we're going to be updating that. But I think you just start from the premise that if it's one of our members, that it would need to be covered by us, and particularly we call that Global Rule 1 because it's a member rule. The members cannot work for non-signatories. The best thing to do, frankly, is if it's a film, you could send me an email and then we could figure out, who's being covered by whom, and then it could get assigned a rep at that point. But that's where I would start.
Great. Okay, I think with that, I just want to say this has been incredibly informative, and thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Thank you to Jean, and thank you so much to Susan. It's been great.